Okay, I think we're live.
Looks like we are.
Great. We were so sorry about the 15-minute delay. I had some kind of glitch in getting the show going. I tried over and over to schedule it, and for whatever reason, it wouldn't take. And finally, at the last minute, it allowed me to schedule one at 4:15. So here we are, and we're so thrilled to be with you. I'm with special guest Mike Christiansen. We've enjoyed the feedback we've gotten from all of you folks. And last week we talked about the death of the ego involved in, if you're recovering, if you're a patient in team therapy, there's one death of the ego associated with depression recovery, one with anxiety recovery, one with healing a troubled relationship with someone you're not getting along with, and then a fourth death of the ego in overcoming a habit and addiction. And then it occurred to me, wow, there's also 4 deaths of the therapist's ego in team CBT, conceivably in any type of therapy. But one is associated with the T equals testing. A second death of the therapist ego is associated with E equals empathy. A third with A equals agenda setting or paradoxical agenda setting, and a fourth is associated with the M equals methods. And we're going to go over that today. And then in addition, we're going to comment on the fact that each of those components of Team CBT, TEAM, is inherently paradoxical, and will reveal what the paradox is at each level of the treatment. Now, we've been very disciplined not to give commercial messages here on our Facebook broadcast, but then the thought came to me, that's kind of baloney. Why aren't we allowed to give commercial messages? We're doing everything for free here, and we'll be very brief about it. But the commercial message I want to give today has to do with Mike Christiansen, because we had a fabulous hike today. I'm pretty recovered from my bronchitis. We just had a fantastic hike. There were only 3 of us, but it was terrific. And one of them was Marla from the Central Valley. I can't remember how to pronounce her last name.
Stekren.
What's it?
Stekren.
I still can't pronounce it, but that's what it is. That's correct. And she was saying that she's a fabulous therapist, and if anyone's in the Central Valley, she'd be a great referral source. But she was saying that she's now a level 2 certified team therapist, and she's been through 2 of your fantastic online trainings, and Mike, and now she's getting individual supervision from you, which I think is a great idea for any therapist who really wants to master these techniques. And she described you as a master. And she says she's watched your evolution from being, awfully good to being great. So there's some kudos to you. Let's say someone in Canada wants to receive some treatment from you online. How do they contact you? And let's say someone wants to sign up for one of your online trainings. How do they do that, Mike?
Yeah, the best way is to go directly to feelinggoodinstitute.com and just Google Feeling Good Institute, and there's therapy options online for myself here in Canada and a number of other really incredible quality therapists around the States as well. And then there's training for therapists, and actually have a 12-week, or it's actually a 13-week. We do a 12-week course, but I do a bonus week because we like doing things for free here in Team. And so that actually starts up tomorrow. But people could still sign up for that if you're a therapist and looking to enhance your skills.
Do you have something starting tomorrow?
That's our spring summer 12-week course.
How many did you have signed up so far?
I think we've got 9 so far. We max at 14. We don't take any more than that, just to really keep the level of quality super high.
Oh, that's great. And can they do personal work too?
With all the groups, we always do personal work.
Super, great. Well, and hello, Dominic. Hello from San Diego. Thanks for the recent tip on antidepressant discontinuation syndrome, Dr. Burns. It's good to know you're going through hell when you're going through hell. Yeah, absolutely. And then Adara says hello, and I can't like you people because I don't have that feature here. And then Samir, hello. Really excited with this. Thank you. Phil McCormick, a regular, loud and clear. Fabrice, bail you guys out, question mark. Yeah, I guess
On the
he's
technical
more high tech than I am. That's sure. And then Macarena Torres Lira, Carmela Sidwell, just love you guys. You're wonderful. Thank you for that. And Michael Christensen, a little technical glitch beyond at 3:15, and here we are. Now let's get started with no further delay. The T equals testing, and I'll kind of, I haven't primed Mike on this, but what is the death of the therapist's ego in T equals testing? And the main testing we do, just in case there's any of you who don't know, we use ultra short, highly accurate scales that ask patients, how are you feeling right now? How depressed are you? How anxious? How suicidal? How angry? Things like that. And we do that before the session begins in the waiting room, and again in the waiting room after the session is over. And that way we can see changes in depression or lack of changes from the start to the end of the session. Also, at the after the session is over, the patient fills out, and this only takes the patient maybe 1 minute, the evaluation of therapy session, and they rate the therapist on how empathic and warm and trusting the therapist was, on how another scale, the helpfulness scale, how helpful the session was, and things of this nature. So what does this have to do with the death of the therapist's ego, Mike?
Well, particularly when we're using the evaluation of therapy session, we're going to get feedback on how well we were listening and hearing and whether we were connecting or not. And then with the brief mood survey, with the testing afterwards, was the treatment we were giving them actually effective? Was there changes happening? And what we discover when we begin to do the testing is we're not as good as we think we are. And in fact, we actually are often quite poor in our empathy skills. And sometimes, in fact, most of the time, we don't know if we don't do the testing. And so the testing can be incredibly humbling because you're going to get that feedback. You know, some people will say, well, won't people tell you what we want to hear? When in fact, the opposite happens with the testing. In fact, they tell us what we don't want to hear, which is that sometimes we suck. We're not that good. We miss the boat. And
that's really well stated, Mike. The one death of the ego is you find out that your perceptions suck. I've done research on therapist accuracy at knowing how the patient perceives you, how depressed the patient is, how suicidal the patient is, how angry the patient is, and therapist accuracy is generally between 0 and 9% in these different dimensions. So you find out that things are not the way you thought. And then a second death of the ego is most of you, if you're therapists watching, you fancy yourself to be pretty good and pretty empathic. And most therapists, when using my scales for the first time, will get failing grades on probably all the scales from all of your patients, or pretty close to that. And it's shocking and disturbing to discover that you suck at acknowledging and understanding how your patient feels, and also that you're not very good at what you're doing. I recently had a chance to review some data with someone who's in training, and she's very well-meaning, and she brought in some of her scales on her patients, and she showed me a woman she's been treating for a year, and at the start of the session, the depression score was 15, which is moderate to severe, and at the end of the session, it was 15. And then I said, how was she a year ago? And she said it was about the same, about 15. And here she's been working with this woman for more than a year, and the therapies had zero benefit. And it's kind of heartbreaking to have to reveal that to a therapist. We're trying to get at least 25 to 50% reduction in a single therapy hour, which I'd say was a good benchmark. When Mike, you and I have worked with people in workshops, and we're going to do some live demos up in Canada shortly, and we usually see, and working with someone with an hour and a half, you know, the symptoms pretty much go into zero, 90 to 100% reduction in symptoms. But initially, therapists, you're going to find maybe that you're not so good at what you do, and that is the death of the ego. Now, death is associated with rebirth, and also paradoxically, what's the paradox involved? You know, Somebody once said, your worst therapeutic failure is your greatest success in disguise. And why might it be a wonderful thing to discover that you're not getting anywhere with somebody and that the patient doesn't even see you as incredibly empathic and doesn't see you as very helpful? How could that be anything good about that, Mike?
Well, that's actually the best thing that could happen. Otherwise, you'll just continue doing the same thing over and over and not get anywhere. And so when you can let your ego die and recognize that you are making errors, then you at least have an opportunity to turn that around, to change it, to fix it and work with it.
Absolutely, if you let your ego die. But if you get defensive, when the patient says, "Oh, you're not helping me, you don't understand me, you don't care about me," if you get defensive, then that's going to just deepen the therapeutic conflict. But if you let your ego die and allow yourself to see the truth and what the patient is saying, then often a little miracle can occur. But it is painful. It's painful for when our loved ones, when we find out that they don't see us as being loving or caring, or they feel hurt or angry, and it's very painful when you think you've been doing good work with someone and then you find out that you've missed the mark. And it takes courage to see this. I was working with a colleague recently, and she said, "Oh, by the way, I gave you an F on empathy," and she was absolutely right. And it's just kind of shocking to see how we can screw up, and it's like getting that information that we've been hiding from ourselves. So that's the first death of the therapist's ego. And if you are a therapist, you have the courage to look at this information and to share it with humility with your patients, with your clients, then tremendous and sometimes rapid evolution and transformation can occur in your therapeutic style and your therapeutic skills.
At the bottom
hello, Yehuda. Loud and clear, good. Hi, Bernie. Bernie, I love you. I'm so glad you're back again. Great to see you. And hi there, David and Mike. And Rand Smith says, hi, everybody. And Craig Jack. I lost Craig here. Oh, yeah, greetings from Oswego, New York. So thankful for these wonderful learning opportunities. Thanks for that. And just wonderful stuff here. Now let's go ahead with this thing and talk about the second death of the therapist ego. E equals empathy. This requires the death of the therapist's ego. What does that mean?
Well, this is where, when our patients or clients are criticizing us or giving us feedback where we're missing the mark in some way, we have to find the truth in what they're saying. We have to recognize that we have made errors, and we have to let go of our ego to kind of be right. And
well, why does that require the death of the therapist's ego? Suppose the patient says, "Oh, Dr. Burns, you're not helping me. You don't care about me. You don't understand how I feel inside." Why would agreeing with those statements involve the death of my ego, Mike?
It's really the only way to get that connection. And if I don't, then I'll continue to be pushing them away by not listening, not hearing them. It's this paradox that happens when we agree with the criticism. It puts the lie to the criticism. There's a paradox. Whereas if we disagree, we actually prove them to be right.
Yeah, if you defend yourself, then they're doubly convinced of what they're saying. And if you agree and say, "Well, it's painful to hear what you're saying, but you're right. I haven't done a good job of understanding you. I've been missing the mark, and I haven't made you feel cared about or supported. Clearly, it hasn't been helpful. Let's talk about this. This is important. You may be feeling discouraged and ripped off and angry and hurt and rejected and the whole 10 yards. But at the same time, this could put us on the same page. This is incredibly important. Tell me about how I've been missing the mark. Tell me about how you've been feeling. Tell me about the problems you have that I haven't been helping you with." And then it kind of opens up like a flower. Now, another thing I'm trying to get at here though, Mike, is why might this involve the death of the therapist's ego? Why isn't it It just sounds like good therapy, good intellectually fun stuff to do. Where's the death?
Well, the death comes in having to let go of our need to know something, to be right. If we don't die to that, then it will continue.
Yeah, because the patient is telling us all the stuff we most don't want to hear. You're a failure, they're saying.
Yeah, I had a guy once.
A son could say you're a failure as a father, or a daughter could say you're a failure as a father. In so many words, they won't put it like that. But it's painful. It tears you apart to hear that. And if you've invested yourself, your pride in being a good therapist, and then you use the empathy scale and the helpfulness scale and start discovering that many of your patients don't really feel that cared about, that supported by you, it kind of hurts. It's painful.
Yeah.
But if you check your ego at the door, it's great. Now on the hike today, we're working with this fellow who's rejected by this intensely attractive person he was dating, and we were doing, I think, really great work. And then I said to him, and Marla was helping me, and we were empathizing. It was real exciting to help him get over his broken heart and his hurt feelings. And how do we do in thought empathy? Summarizing what you've been thinking. And he said, "Oh, that's an A." How have we been doing on feeling empathy, grasping how you're feeling? Well, I knew it was an A because I went through the mood table and I'd acknowledge he was sad and anxious and ashamed and angry. And, I had all of it just perfectly nailed. And he said, "Oh, that's an A." And I said, "And how are we doing on warmth and compassion and acceptance?" And he said, "Oh, pretty good." I said, "Okay, so it wasn't an A. To tell me what grade we're getting." And
you missed something.
It out. And he said, B+. Okay, well, tell me where we're falling short. And he said, "Well, I feel like maybe you're not grasping how painful it is for me. We've been laughing a little, making jokes, having fun with it," he said, "which is good. But I'm not sure you see, how devastated I feel, or that this is a very real, I've been in tremendous pain since Monday when I was rejected."
How deep that was for him.
Yeah. And then we were able to comment on that and then get an A, and then we went ahead and had a blow-away session. But, you're probably a pretty humble guy. I tend to be a little on the narcissistic side. And so I feel ashamed when I find out I'm missing the boat, or, and that it's painful. But if you're willing to die, then you're suddenly in heaven because you've got this great relationship. Now, why, Mike, is this also paradoxical? You touched on it earlier. What's the paradox involved in the empathy part of team therapy?
Well, the paradox is in the disarming technique.
Yeah.
Where if we agree with the criticism, it puts a lie to it. Whereas if we are defensive and disagree with the criticism, we actually prove that it's true. I had a gentleman at the bottom of the evaluation of therapy session. There's a section to write, what did you like the least about the session? What did you like the best? And I had one person write down, "You suck. I never want to see you again. You're the worst therapist ever."
Really?
And yeah. And
oh man, I have to put that in my book. I put it on my nightstand to cheer myself up when that happens to me.
And it was shocking because I thought I'd actually done a good session.
Yeah. Exactly.
And fortunately, I had a session with this the following week, and I was able to say to him, because I really looked at it and thought, wow, I got to do some good 5 secrets here. I got to do some disarming, agree with this criticism. How can I agree that I suck? I mean, people like Marla say I'm, fantastic.
A giant.
And a giant. And yet I realized as I thought back, and because I had that feedback, I realized, and I started talking about something over in this direction, and I think there was something very important that I missed during my empathy with this particular person. And so I came back and said, when I read what you'd wrote there, you wrote, "You suck, I never want to see you again, you're the worst therapist ever." It was hard for me to read that. That's an I feels statement.
Yeah.
And it was hard because it was true. It
Yeah.
was completely true. I actually, I sucked. I was the worst therapist ever. And if I were you, I wouldn't want to come back and see me either. And that's the disarming technique. And then I did a little inquiry by saying, I'm sensing I missed something very important you were trying to tell me. And I kind of got off on my own world. Am I on the right track there? And what happened then was this person began to just unload on me and really let it all out. And we ended up having a few more sessions together and ended up being probably one of the most rewarding working relationships I've ever had. Really connected.
Fantastic.
And this person told me, which was a bit sad actually to hear, that I was the first person that had ever listened to them in their whole life.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I'd realized if I'd been defending myself in that moment, I would have just been another one of those people that didn't listen to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas
And
when I let go of my ego.
Story. I just love your story. And that's what I mean when I say your worst therapeutic failure is almost always your greatest success in disguise. And the problem isn't that we fail in relationships. I think most people do. I don't think Jill ever does. Even Jill Levitt has given examples, when she's, gotten crabby or something with one of her kids or whatever. I mean, she is just such
phenomenal,
beautiful, compassionate person. But almost all of us fail. And the problem is not that we fail, but that it's the cover-up. It's not the crime, but the cover-up. That's the problem. Yeah. And if you acknowledge the failure with warmth, with curiosity, with openness, it becomes your greatest success in disguise, because that's probably the patient's core conflict, what the psychoanalysts call the core conflict. As with your patient, his core conflict is people will never listen to me. People will not value me. And when that happens in the therapy and you admit that it's happening, it's such a gift to the patient. My worst one was a patient, and I've talked about quite a bit, who told me once during a therapy session, your therapy is worse than the incest I endured as a child.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just horrible to my ears, and I had worked so hard for her. I'd given so much of myself, and it seemed so unfair for her to say that, and I couldn't see how it could possibly be true. And I was so angry, but I just bit my tongue and kind of hung on to the end of the session. And then that weekend, I used to jog around a certain college near our house and think about tough cases. Sometimes a colleague of mine, Tony Bates, would join me, a really neat guy from Ireland, a psychologist, but he was tied up that weekend, so I was just jogging alone, and I was telling myself, you've got to find out the truth in what she's saying. And then I would shout out, there is no truth in what she said. She's just being mean-spirited, and I've given so much to her. And then I told myself, but David, you say there's always truth in a criticism. You got to see the truth in her criticism. And I'd say there is no truth in this criticism. And that's what we all do. We're defending ourselves. We don't want to hear about our failures. And then it hit me like lightning. And I think I saw it. And I saw her the next week. And I apologize I probably told this story a million times. So if you've heard it, that's chalk it off to David's impending senility. But at any rate, I told her, I said, I felt so hurt and angry when you said that last week, because it seemed so unfair, because I've worked so hard for you. And then you said that my therapy was worse than incest that you endured as a child. I couldn't have any idea how that could be true. And then I saw that it really was true, that in a way I've been kind of exploiting you, trying to get you to use my techniques and see how cool my techniques are. And that was kind of exploiting you for my own purposes. And when I saw that, I felt ashamed and saw that what you were saying was really right. And I can imagine how angry and hurt and demoralized you feel, how hopeless and put down, and a lack of compassion, a lack of warmth, a lack of respect. And as hard as it is for me to hear that, it's so important. I want to hear what you have to say. Tell me about it. And then she just started sobbing uncontrollably, and all that poison came out, and then she began working really hard, doing homework, and we found the technique that worked for her, and her depression entirely went away after really years and years of failed therapy for depression from many therapists. And she later told me that that was the moment that changed her life. It's the same as what your patient told you. Somebody's finally listening to the truth and what I'm trying to say. And then the moment I finally admitted that she was right, she didn't believe it anymore. That's the paradox. But it's hard, and it's a real death. Yeah. And a lot of therapists will not do that, and probably will not do that in their lifetime. The defenses are too great, or they don't know how to do it, or they're too ashamed to do it. But it's a very powerful phenomenon. So let's stay on target here. What's the next death of the ego involved in A equals agenda setting, or what we call paradoxical agenda setting? How could this involve yet another death of another component of the therapist's self or ego?
I think this is something you put as one of your tips last week. What is the biggest error that therapists and helpers make?
Just stop for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Karen Perlman is here from the intensive with her dog. So great to see you, Karen. I don't know if you've been joining us on previous Sundays, and now here you are. Yes, Karen and Faith, my guide dog, are here in New York City. And Karen, you came on your own on the plane to the intensive last summer, and we hiked with Faith, and it just warms my heart to hear from you. Now I will shut up and let you continue, Mike. I'm sorry. But I just got excited when I saw your name, Karen.
We just love having people join us, and so that's so great to acknowledge. And I'm kind of excited to meet Karen someday myself. So
yeah.
We were talking about the agenda setting end of things, and where the biggest failure people make as therapists, counselors, is trying to help people.
Right.
And we get in this
the need to help, the urge to help patients is the cause of almost all, if not all, therapeutic failure.
Yeah, we rush into helping them before they've actually asked for it, whether they're even asking for it at all.
Right.
And really, when we're trained in grad school, it's what we're trained to do. You've got this problem, I've got a solution, let me help you. And yet, do people actually want help when they come in? Sometimes what they're coming in for is actually serving them exceptionally well, and there's a lot of good reasons for them not to want help.
Yes, and the whole focus of paradoxical agenda setting is the patient becomes the voice of resistance, not the voice of helping. But again, this is tricky. You have to. It takes a lot of skill, and it's hard to learn to do these things in a genuine, non-gimmicky way. But you persuade the patient not to change. You become the voice of resistance and put all the advantages and the benefits of the depression, of the anxiety, of the guilt and shame, of the inadequacy, of the loneliness, of the humiliation, of the hopelessness, of the frustration, of the anger. Every negative feeling, you help the patient see the benefits of that feeling, and there are generally many, as well as what that feeling shows about them that's awesome and mind-blowing, the beautiful things that these, what we call symptoms, show about you. And then we say, given all of that, why would you want to press that magic button and make it all disappear today? And so the therapist has to sit with open hands and really see the world through the patient's eyes and see all the reasons the patient has these kinds of symptoms, darn good reasons. And this is the exact opposite of how most therapy works. And I would say many therapists, maybe most, will not be able to learn this in your lifetime. You even if you go into team therapy training, you'll drop out. You won't succeed in learning it. And the reason is because you won't allow the death of your helping ego, your codependent ego, your narcissistic ego, your need to be in control, to be the expert, who helps the person who's broken or defective. And team is a radically different formulation. And I was thrilled before the broadcast started to learn from you, Mike, about the Aboriginal clinic that you're working in, and what the basis of that clinic is. Maybe you could summarize that briefly.
Yeah, I have an opportunity to once a week work at a place, and the name of the clinic is called Yatwatlab, which is a Aboriginal First Nations treatment center. I'm a mental health clinician there. And the name itself means when I'm helping you, you're helping me, but we're equals. There is no ego involved. I don't reach down to help you like you're some needy person that I need to pick up. That's disrespectful. And in fact, it's not helpful. We come together hand in hand, and we walk together. And so when you need my help, I'm there with you, but I don't force you into it.
That is so cool. I had no idea that there was some idea like that in Aboriginal culture, and I really love it, because that's exactly what we've come to in team therapy. And why this is paradoxical, again, is because it's a role reversal. You see, the therapist becomes the patient, becomes the resistance, and when you do that, suddenly the patient will want to change, at least 90% of the time, and will want to change. And so the patient becomes the voice of change. And it's exactly the opposite of the way I was trained during psychiatric residency at University of Pennsylvania. I was grateful to have the residency training there and the professional training. I learned to publish articles, do research of various kinds. The people were, tremendous intellects and really helpful to me. I was green, and they taught me a lot. But again, it was this medical model where you're broken, and I'm the expert who will fix you. And of course, we do have expertise to offer. We do want to help people recover, but it's a radically different model. It's the opposite of conventional psychology and psychiatry.
It's painful to let that go, because we often are people who we're very caring and loving. We want to help people, and it's almost an addictive kind of thing that we get sucked into.
It was that for the first 5, 6, 7 years of my practice. I wouldn't have wanted to learn team therapy, because I was going to be the expert who was going to cure everybody, and I was very addicted to that. It made me feel excited and special and all of that. But it was also kind of a two-edged sword, because it wasn't, when I ran into real resistant patients, then my tools were pretty limited in the early days. And I can remember when there was the actual death of my own ego. I was walking down Bryn Mawr Avenue with Wendy Dryden from London, who was one of the early cognitive therapists, and a really nice guy and a really smart guy. And he used to come to the U.S. once a year, and he'd visit Albert Ellis, who he loved. I kind of loved Ellis too. He was a wild guy, but he had
endearing qualities.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wendy would come by and stay at my house for a day or two also on his trips. And I was talking about this patient that I was so stuck with. It was a young guy with severe borderline personality disorder. I mean, he was severe. He would call you up and just say, I'm sitting here with a gun for my head, and if you don't do X, Y, or Z, I'm going to pull the trigger right now. He pulled stuff like that. He was really, really challenging, and I was trying so hard to help him. And I remember one weekend I had over 30 emergency calls with him in one weekend alone. And then on Sunday night, he called me and said, I'm going to commit suicide because you haven't been helpful enough to me this weekend. It was just ridiculous. And I told Wendy, and he said, why are you working so hard for this patient? And I said, well, he's very severe. I said, what do you do about patients with borderline personality disorder in England? And he said, well, we tell them they're limited to 1 3-minute call per week, and that's all, and that they've got to do their homework. And I said, well, what if they say that's not enough? And he said, well, I probably shouldn't say it on Facebook, but it's kind of like you can go away, I guess. Kind of like go blank yourself, type of thing. But in polite language. In other words, he was saying, this is what we're offering you, and if you don't like it, go somewhere else. This is how we function. I said, what happens? He says, 90% of the time or more, they go for it. And so when I saw the patient, I couldn't believe it. And I said, he's right. I've just been trying so hard. It's all my ego. And when I saw the patient the next day, I says, this isn't working here. And I think the world of you. And I hope you'll stick with me. But if we work together, I'm going to just give you one brief phone call a week. And you're going to have to start doing homework assignments and working together as a team. And if you don't like it, you're going to have to find another therapist, because I can't help you like this, and I hope you'll stay. And he stayed, and he did well. It turned things around, but I had to let go of something that I was clinging to, a self that I thought was so special.
It's amazing when you're on the other side as well. And I think one of the beauties of the team training that you do on the hikes and with the groups is you experience being the patient, because we work with each other doing personal work. And I will never forget, it was, I think, the first 4-day intensive of yours that I attended a number of years ago, and I was still struggling a little bit with some depression and other things, and you'd come over.
You still had that shoplifting addiction at that time.
yeah. Oh yeah, that one too. But you'd come over to the little group I was working with, and said, how are you guys doing? What's the problem here? And they were having a tough time with this concept, and you were demonstrating Magic Dial, which is a paradoxical agenda setting technique. And you asked me, I was the one doing personal work.
Oh, you were?
How frustrated do you want to be?
Yeah.
How frustrated would you like to be? And I thought, what a ridiculous question. And really what you were doing was bringing to light that it wasn't your agenda how frustrated I should or shouldn't be. It was up to me. And then I started to say, well, I don't want to be frustrated at all. And you said, well, aren't you sure? There's some really great things about you. And then right away I started to fight you and say, no, I want to change. This is what I really want to have happen. And I became now fighting for my own recovery rather than you as the therapist having to do it. And that's what I experience with my patients. It's
amazingly powerful. You've got to experience it as a patient and as a therapist to see just how mind-blowing this is. It's nothing like the way I was trained, and the results are nothing like what I saw in the past. It's just extraordinarily. We're going to part 4 here, but we'll have a 15-second break here to say hello to Adara Leia, who's just joined us, gives us a nice smiley face and laughter is great. Dominic Rolla, good broadcast for your train. Dan, good to see you, Dan. I hope you come up for another hike soon. We do need to chat. We saw Marla today. Dan says, hi, Mike. Hi, David. And Jerry Fernandez, love Team CBT and the concept of it. Will be applying for Team CBT soon. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Jenny, Fernandez, yeah. And then Monica, Georgiao, hello. And Karen gave us a beautiful comment. I didn't notice when I mentioned your name earlier, but she says your podcast and Facebook Live on Facebook Live, not to mention the tools and techniques, have been invaluable to my growth and development and evolution as a therapist and in my practice. Thank you so much. Incredible and gratifying to see the transformation in my patients too. And if you like these broadcasts but aren't aware of my Feeling Good podcasts with host Fabrice and I, we actually have live therapy on them and all kinds of good stuff. You can find those on my website, feelinggood.com. There's a tab in the upper left-hand area there for the Feeling Good podcasts, and you can sign up for them for free. You can also get them on YouTube, on iTunes, and a lot of things. And this month, I think we're looks like from the numbers watching, we're going to go to more than 50,000 downloads this month for the first time. So it's growing. And by the way, all of you, if you like what you're hearing, please share these with friends. I've been told to say share with friends. I don't even know what sharing is, but apparently there's some little thing at the bottom of my blogs and various communications where you can share. And if you can start sharing these things, we want to build our audience too. We're around about 1,000 a week on these. Each Facebook broadcast which gets 1,000, which is nice, but it would be great to see the numbers grow here too. Okay, the final thing. and we're right on schedule. What is the death of the therapist ego on the M equals methods? We've talked about the death of the ego on the T equals testing, on E equals empathy, on A equals agenda setting, and the fourth death of the therapist's ego has to do with M equals methods. Tell us about that, Mike.
Well, the thing with methods is that we want to be very careful we don't get married into any one method. When you get into these schools of therapy and ideas, they have the one method that works for that 2 or 3 patients, and then they write a book about it. But that doesn't work for everyone. We need to let go of this idea that one trick pony methods are going to work for everyone, because that's just not true. We're far too complex. And so we have to die to the idea that our favored method is the one. And what we do in team is we draw from a variety of different methods. There's 50 basic ones, plus we use another probably 10 or 15 regularly, and we fail.
By the way, another commercial in my new book, and I'll have an appendix probably called 100 Ways to Untwist Your Thinking. I'll have all those original 50 that I've had for years, and all the new ones that have evolved, all the more sophisticated communication techniques, paradoxical agenda setting techniques, things like forced empathy, and the Don Balcom technique, and relationship probe, and the high school reunion technique, and the anti-brushfire technique. There'll be a lot of cool stuff, hopefully, in the new book.
Perfect. I'm so glad you interrupted me there, because Dara Lay is asking the question, does paradoxical agenda setting work when a patient does it on themselves through bibliotherapy? And I think that's a lot of the paradoxical agenda setting will be addressed in the new book. Am I correct?
Yes, and I think yes, the answer is yes. And I'm more encouraged by the working with a patient, teach you how to do it. It's kind of slow sledding trying to convert therapists, but most people who are suffering are happy to pick up tools. And this is one that you can easily apply on your own, easier even than cognitive therapy. I'll have all the great cognitive therapy in the new book, but I'll have all of this fantastic new paradoxical agenda setting. And yes, and people have already emailed me from just reading between the lines and saying it's made a huge difference in their life. And the Feeling Good podcast, like Dan Prine, requires his patients to watch the Feeling Good podcast, and they learn about it there. As well. Now, what is this concept, though, of joyous failure, Mike, in the methods part of team? What does joyous failure mean?
Joyous failure is that when we have a method, and if it isn't working, we don't stick with it. We think, okay, perfect, that's actually fantastic. Now we can move on to another method that may work. We don't get stuck in that thing and keep banging our head against the wall and then create additional hopelessness for our patients. It's why I think sometimes people that come to us and they've had failure after failure in therapy, it's one of these deaths that hasn't been adhered to, maybe the empathy death or likely the methods death. Somebody said, oh, you need this particular type, and then it doesn't work, and then they feel more despair and despondent, whereas we say, oh, well, that's great, that didn't work, let's move on to the next one.
Right. And what, Mike, is a recovery circle? Suppose you have a thought, I'm a worthless human being, or I'm hopeless, or I shouldn't have screwed up, or I should be better than I can, or so-and-so rejected me, this means I'm defective, this means I'll be alone forever, or I can't be happy without being loved. What is a recovery circle?
Once we've done our testing A+ empathy and agenda setting, and the client or patient has said, yes, I'm ready to overcome this and willing to let go and do whatever it takes, we take one of those specific thoughts that we're going to now try to defeat, crush, we put it into the middle of what's called a recovery circle, and there'll be 16 different kind of empty boxes around the circle, and we plug in different methods to it, and on the back page we can plug in another 16. And we choose methods from a variety of different schools and angles to attack this thought with. Some of them will be more particularly aimed at that type of thought. And then we fail as fast as we can until we find the method that works for them. And once we do, then that method will work for them for the rest of their life. It's not so much falling down into depression or sadness that's the problem. It's not knowing how to get up. And so the recovery circle helps us find which tool is going to help them to get up. And once they know how to do that, they're good to go.
Now let's talk about the paradoxical aspect of the M equals methods. And the idea here let's take the most powerful technique of all, the externalization of voices with role reversals and with the acceptance paradox and all this good stuff, and be specific and good stuff thrown in. But when we're doing, say, externalization of voices, what role, Mike, is the therapist in?
The therapist plays the role of the patient's negative thoughts, so that negative self-talk.
Once again, the therapist is not the voice of change, but the voice of negativity. And what voice does the patient take?
The patient plays the positive or rational or realistic or true thoughts that can defeat those negative ones.
So again, instead of trying to help the patient and be this expert, we're saying, I have the same name as you, and I'm going to start beating up on you the way you're beating up on yourself. And like today, the therapist who kind of got rejected is somebody who I'd say is just, on a realistic level, I would say he's a spectacularly attractive person from virtually every perspective, and he was being a bit of a player and just ran into someone who was chasing him, so he had the power, and then he slipped up and suddenly became needy and wondered, is this person going to reject me? And the moment he became needy, he got rejected instantly. It's like a rule of the universe. If you chase someone, they'll be obligated to reject you. They suddenly don't want you. And it's inherent in dating and practically everything that goes on in the universe. If you chase, it runs away. And if you stop chasing, it comes to you. It's a need.
We want what we can't have, but we don't want what we already have.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So one of his thoughts, and I can't use his language, but I effed up because, I should know this. I do know this. And so then I became the negative voice, say, you effed up, you'll never be happy without this person, blah, blah, blah. And then he had to come to his own defense. We did some role reversals to help him a little over this or that thing that he wasn't quite hitting it out of the park. And then he picked up some ideas from us and hit all of his negative thoughts out of the park. But he is doing the healing. So he is empowered, which is quite different from saying, here's an antidepressant to correct the chemical imbalance in your brain, which puts you in the role of someone who's broken and needy, and put me in the role of some expert who's fixing you. It's a very paradoxical approach, and we wouldn't be pushing it just because we're in love with paradox. We're pushing it because we're seeing rapid, mind-blowing changes. He went from intense despair to euphoria by the end of the hike. Not only gotten over his feelings of rejection, but a fantastic plan on how to move forward and probably turn the tables on the person who rejected him and make that person start chasing him again, which I suspect is going to happen. And I love that devious side of dating, coaching people too. And it just does my heart good to see people having fun, sowing your wild oats and getting your needs for love and affection and sexuality, fulfilled in a kind of joyous way. But anyway, that's the paradoxical aspect of team. So,
just thinking a great example of this was in our show last week when we did Feared Fantasy.
Yeah, remind me, because in my elderly senile ways,
we did
it's too long for me to remember.
We did Feared Fantasy, which is a technique you could use for somebody that has kind of anxiety about how somebody might be looking down on them or rejecting them. And so you became kind of, this...
Feared Fantasy. David
from hell, where you were attacking me, and then Rovers and I attacked you, and it was great fun.
Yeah.
And we were demonstrating how, as a therapist, you're actually going to have them face their fear directly by becoming their worst fear instead of trying to coddle them or encourage them.
Right. So that's it. We'll see if anyone has questions, but a little feedback to share here. Adara says, fantastic. Thank you both. That's Adara Laya. Thank you for that. Mimi Lee, very excited to hear, let me just get this, about all of this stuff in the new book. Can't wait to read it. Craig Jack, any idea about a release date for the new book? I got this last week and didn't have time to get around to it, but no, I don't know the release date yet. I haven't even contacted a publisher yet. The reason is I'm pretty sure that a number of publishers will be interested in it, but I didn't want to get into a pressure cooker, because once you get into a contract, it's all about money and deadlines, and I just want to kind of enjoy the process of writing. And I'm sending out my partial draft now to a number of colleagues. I'll send one to you, Mike, if you want to look at it, just to get positive and negative feedback. And then once I feel that I'm on the right track, then I'll send the draft to, you know, a few publishers and see who would want to set up a nice, you know, a contract, and then we'll have a release date. But I would say I'm over the hump on it now, unless people who read it say this totally sucks, then I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board. But if it's even partially on the right track, it won't be that hard to finish it up. So maybe by the end of the year, something like that. Bernie says, David, if you're pushing towards senility, I want some. Thank you for that. You're very kind. Carmela Sidwell, I live in Nevada, and you don't have any online therapists in Las Vegas. For that,
you know, you could do.
Could be. I have a colleague there, David Antonuccio, who does therapy. Really good guy, but probably contact the Feeling Good Institute, yeah. and maybe there are some folks who can treat you, like Annie Hanaway. Dr. Annie Hanaway in Portland sometimes works with people in other states through the internet. And also, who else do we have?
Daniel Minty does some, where he's got some licensing in other states as well.
From Santa Fe, yeah. And you can get their contacts through the feelinggoodinstitute.com.
Yeah, yeah. David, I wonder if I can do a little commercial on your upcoming Canada work here. Would that be
thank you. Good idea, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw the word out there. David's coming to Canada in June. He's going to be in Calgary for 2 days, beginning of June, I think 4th and 5th, and then in Winnipeg on the 6th and 7th, or 7th and 8th, those 2 days, 2 days each on anxiety. Going to do some personal work. I think we've been talking about doing a bonus evening, kind of free thing, and these are incredible opportunities to do some work on yourself, as well as to learn some additional skills. And here's the bonus is, right now the Canadian dollar is really poor compared to the US one. So if you're in the US, you're looking for a cheaper way to get some great training, you'll get C credits and everything. Then,
join us in Calgary or Winnipeg, and then Mike's going to be there, and he's going to be my co-therapist for the evening live demos. And this might be, I think, certainly will be among my last, if not my last, iterations of this 2-day anxiety workshop. I've been doing it for probably 5 or 10 years, and it's been one of my most popular workshops. And you'll learn, 15, 20 techniques for treating every kind of anxiety. And it's a good workshop. It's a fun 2 days. So we hope you can join us. And then also Mike is going to join me for the summer intensive in Whistler, also sponsored by Jack Hiroshi and Associates. So for these, I guess you can go to my website, feelinggood.com, and just go to my workshop tab, and then you can get links to learn more about these programs if you'd like to attend.
We'd love to see you there, and if you're kind of a regular, then let us know. We'll maybe do a dinner some evening all together or something like that as well. It'd be great fun.
Yeah, and let's see if there's any questions here. No, I think we're about it. So we could just finish up a few minutes early here, unless there's any other brilliant thoughts that went through your mind, Mike.
I was just reading Bernie's comment. David, if you're pushing towards senility, I want some.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Bernie. Bernie is
that depth of the ego right there, Bernie. That was fantastic.
Yeah, very, very kind. Yeah, well, I just feel lucky to have so many wonderful people, colleagues to hang out with.
I have one
really
final
amazing. Samir has, let's do Samir, and then you can give us the final word. Samir, depressed people are treated by even loved ones as having some character flaw. Yeah, exactly. the paradoxical methods really put patients in control. Absolutely. And in my recovery, I found that very helpful. I'm in control of my feelings is most empowering. Thank you. Yeah, it's a fantastic thing. And if you told me about this years ago, I would have laughed you out of the building. But it's really true. Our motivations are so important. And when you melt away the resistance, a giant emerges out of the brains of pretty much every depressed person. It's such a shock to the system to see the healing power that we all have inside of us. Any final comments, Mike?
Often methods are hardly even needed. I've run into that where recovery happens during agenda setting. My final thought was just as you were talking about your situation where you were working so hard, answering all these phone calls. And that's been one of the tips for me as a therapist. When I'm feeling like I'm getting a little run down, like I'm working too hard, it's my ego getting in the way almost every single time, because now I'm trying to do the patient's job and the client's job instead of letting go of my ego and allowing them to be driving the bus, as it were.
As I've gotten older, I've seen more and more how my narcissism, my ego is the source of a lot of my suffering. My beloved wife, Melanie, has kindly made me aware of that. And it's been kind of painful to see, but it's liberating. It's liberating as well. We're all kind of trapped in this human condition.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we let go, boy, this work is fun. It's energizing. I can come home from the end of the day having walked through some pretty intense things, but feeling energized, feeling good, not like I'm carrying this weight on my shoulders. And so that's one of the beauties.
I love doing therapy. I get so high from doing therapy. It's mind-blowing, and it's a blessing.
Preventing therapist burnout, team is the ticket.
Yeah, we can have another session on therapist burnout, but we're about out of time, and we'll quit 4 minutes early today. We apologize for being 15 minutes late, and hope you have had a good hour with us, almost an hour. I've enjoyed it a lot, Mike. I so appreciate working with you. Now, next week, I'm going to be celebrating my wife's birthday, and we have some activities that make it impossible to be home here at this hour. So we will not be meeting next Sunday, but we'll meet again in 2 weeks. And I don't know what the topic is going to be, but we'll cook up something.
Yeah, I think Jill is back then as well.
Is she?
I think so. But we'll confirm that. We'll get Lisa to keep everyone up to date.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. Bye bye, everybody, and have a great day. Bye bye.
Awesome.